Sometimes a band reaches the very top just as everything behind the scenes is starting to fall apart. In 1981, Whitesnake looked unstoppable. They had a lineup packed with talent, hit singles climbing the charts, sold-out tours, and an album many fans still consider the greatest rock record of their classic blues rock era. But while Come and Get It sounded confident and full of swagger, the reality couldn't have been more different. The band recorded the album inside the former home of John Lennon during one of the darkest moments in rock history. Strange stories surrounded the sessions, money was becoming a serious problem, and friendships that had helped build Whitesnake were beginning to crack. The album became one of the biggest successes of David Coverdale's career, but it also marked the beginning of the end for one of rock's greatest lineups. This is the story of Come and Get It. By the end of 1980, Whitesnake had become one of the hottest rock bands in Britain. David Coverdale had already proven he could build a successful band after leaving Deep Purple with the guitarist Bernie Martin and Mick Moody, bassist Neil Murray, keyboard legend John Lennon, and drummer Ian Pace. Whitesnake had grown into the powerful live act that mixed blues, hard rock, and just enough pop hooks to appeal to a wide audience. Instead of trying to reinvent themselves, the band wanted to keep building on the formula. Songs came together quickly. Coverdale, Martin, and Moody handled most of the writing, focusing on strong riffs, catchy choruses, and the kind of blues-based rock that have become Whitesnake's trademark. There wasn't a lot of overthinking involved. The goal was simple: write songs people could sing along with while sounding heavy enough for the rock fans. Once the material was ready, the band headed to one of the most famous recording locations in England, and that's where things started to get strange. The sessions took place at Starling Studios in Ascot. Now, this wasn't just another recording studio. It was located inside Tittenhurst Park, former home of John Lennon and Yoko Ono. By the time Whitesnake arrived, the estate belonged to Ringo Starr, who had renamed the studio Starling Studios. Just walking through the property felt like stepping into rock history. The Beatles had spent time there. Lennon had written music there. Some of the most famous photographs of the Beatles had been taken on the grounds. Inside the studio sat one very special piece of history. John Lennon's famous white piano was still there. Whitesnake actually used that piano during the recording sessions, something few bands could ever say. Producer Martin Birch also had to get creative because the studio itself was surprisingly small. Instead of placing Ian Pace in the recording room, Birch had him set up a drum kit in the hallway. It sounds crazy, but the hallway had high ceilings that create a huge natural drum sound. Everyone played while listening through headphones because they couldn't even see each other. Guitarists recorded inside tiny isolation booths that Birch had built to keep the sound under control. It wasn't the most comfortable setup, but somehow it worked beautifully. Then, halfway through recording, the atmosphere changed forever. On December 8th, 1980, the band learned that John Lennon had been murdered in New York. The news shocked the entire world. For Whitesnake, it even felt more personal. They were recording inside Lennon's former home. Suddenly, every room in the building carried a different feeling. Bernie Martin later recalled that the estate became incredibly quiet and heavy after the news broke. What had already felt like a place filled with Beatles history now felt almost like a memorial. Some members even talked about feeling as if they were being watched while walking through the house late at night. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, it's easy to understand why the atmosphere became so emotional. Everywhere they looked reminded them of Lennon. It all added another layer to an album that already carried plenty of emotion. While the songs would come together, the relationships inside the band were slowly beginning to fall apart. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Concerts were getting bigger, album sales kept growing, fans loved the lineup, but behind closed doors, several serious problems were developing. The biggest issue was money. Despite Whitesnake becoming one of Britain's biggest rock bands, many of the members were basically earning a regular salary. David Coverdale owned the Whitesnake name, and songwriting royalties mainly went to those who wrote the songs. That meant musicians like Neil Murray weren't seeing the same financial rewards, despite being a huge part of the band's sound. John Lennon and Ian Pace had already enjoyed massive success with Deep Purple. They expected the business side of the band to reflect that level of success. Instead, frustrations continued to grow. Management wasn't helping either. Former Deep Purple manager John Coletta's company controlled much of the band's business affairs, and there were growing complaints about how everything was being handled financially. Even Coverdale was becoming frustrated. At the same time, he had bigger ambitions. He desperately wanted Whitesnake to break into the American market. The band was already huge across the UK and Europe, but success in the United States remained out of reach. As Coverdale became more determined to reach that goal, some members began feeling less like equal partners, more like employees. Even inside the guitar team, small cracks were beginning to appear. Bernie Marsden was becoming Coverdale's main songwriting partner, while Mickey Moody started feeling pushed further into the background. Nothing exploded during the Come and Get It sessions, but the warning signs were there. The classic lineup was beginning to fracture, even as they were creating one of their greatest albums. If the music wasn't enough to get people talking, the album artwork certainly was. The cover featured a white snake trapped inside a glass apple. It was designed by British artist Malcolm Horton and was full of symbolism about temptation and desire. But there was one detail that many people completely missed. The snake's tongue had been painted to resemble female anatomy. It wasn't an accident. Horton later admitted he had done it deliberately to make the artwork feel more dangerous and provocative. David Coverdale wasn't exactly known for his subtle lyrics, so the artwork matched the band's image perfectly. But not everyone agreed. When the album was prepared for release in the United States, record executives immediately objected. Rather than commission an entirely new cover, they simply had the tongue airbrushed into a normal-looking snake tongue before the album reached American record stores. Most fans never even realized there were two different versions of the cover. Even more interesting, the original painting eventually disappeared. Its current location remains unknown, turning it into one more piece of Whitesnake history that has become surrounded by mystery. And with all that behind them, it was finally time for fans to hear what the band had been working on. Come and Get It would deliver some of the biggest songs of Whitesnake's classic era and help push the band to heights they have never reached before. When Come and Get It finally arrived in April 1981, it didn't take long to prove that Whitesnake had another winner on their hands. The album shot all the way to number 2 on the UK albums chart, only being kept off the top spot by Adam and the Ants. For a band that had spent years building its reputation one album at a time, this was another huge step forward. Fans loved the record because it captured everything that made the classic Whitesnake lineup so special. It had heavy blues riffs, big choruses, great musicianship, and enough swagger to remind everyone that David Coverdale was becoming one of rock's most recognizable frontmen. Even today, many fans consider Come and Get It to be the peak of Whitesnake's blues rock years, before the band moved toward a more polished American sound later in the decade. And once you look at the songs, it's easy to understand why. The album doesn't waste any time. The title track, Come and Get It, kicks things off with huge guitar riffs and one of those choruses that immediately sticks in your head. It perfectly introduces the attitude of the record. It's confident, it's loud, and it sounds like a band that knows exactly who they are.
If you need some love and affection.
Then there's Where I Lied to You, built around a simple groove and plenty of blues swagger. It's classic Whitesnake. Coverdale sounds relaxed and confident, and John Lord's keyboards and the twin guitars of Bernie Marsden and Mickey Moody give the song plenty of personality. It's the kind of track that feels effortless, even though a lot of talent went into making it sound that way. Another favorite is Wine, Women, and Song. This one's pure fun, energetic, catchy, became a real highlight during the band's live shows. If you wanted a song that summed up Whitesnake's image at the time, that would probably be it. And this Child of Babylon, the track shows another side of the band, is darker, more dramatic, gives the musicians room to stretch out a little more into some straightforward rockers. It also reminds listeners that Whitesnake wasn't just about party songs. They could create atmosphere too. From beginning to end, the album stays remarkably consistent. There aren't many weak moments. Every member of the band has a chance to shine. John Lord fills the songs with his unmistakable Hammond organ. Ian Pace delivers another masterclass behind the drums. Neil Murray quietly holds everything together with his rock-solid bass playing. Meanwhile, Marsden and Moody continue proving why they were one of the best guitar partnerships in British hard rock. Of course, every successful album needs songs that can reach beyond the hard rock audience. For Come and Get It, those songs were Don't Break My Heart Again and What I Lied to You. Released as the lead single, Don't Break My Heart Again became one of Whitesnake's biggest hits. It climbed into the UK top 20 and remains one of the band's signature songs. The song has everything that made Whitesnake work: a memorable chorus, great guitar work, and one of John Lord's finest keyboard performances. It's still a staple of classic rock radio today.
If you need some love and affection.
The follow-up single, Where I Lied to You, also performed well, reaching the UK top 20. While it wasn't quite as big as the first single, it reinforced the idea that Whitesnake had become one of Britain's most dependable rock bands. By this point, they weren't just releasing good albums, they were consistently producing songs that audiences remembered. Success on the charts led to something every band wanted in the early 80s, television exposure. One of the biggest moments came when Whitesnake appeared on Germany's popular television program Rock Pop. For a hard rock band, that kind of exposure was priceless. The performance helped push Don't Break My Heart Again even further into the public eye, continuing to build growing audience across Europe. By now, Whitesnake had become one of the continent's biggest rock acts. The concerts were bigger, crowds were larger, and every new album seemed to push the band another step forward. It looked like they were finally found the perfect lineup, but appearances can be misleading. As successful as Come and Get It became, it couldn't solve the problems growing behind the scenes. Arguments over money had never gone away, neither had the frustration over management. Creative differences were also becoming harder to ignore. David Coverdale's dream was becoming clearer every day. He wanted to conquer America. To do that, he believed Whitesnake would eventually have to evolve. Not everyone agreed with that vision. Some members were perfectly happy continuing as the blues-based hard rock band that had already made them successful. Others felt that contributions weren't being fully appreciated. The friendships that had carried the band throughout the years were beginning to weaken. Looking back today, it's amazing that listeners couldn't hear more of the attention on the album itself, because musically everyone was still performing at an incredibly high level. Sometimes that's even how great bands work. Even when relationships are falling apart, they can still create incredible music together. But I will be continuing the story. The road to Saints and Sinners would be filled with lineup changes, business battles, uncertainty, and a band fighting for its very survival. Also mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. So if you thought the story behind Come and Get It was dramatic, trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. So in the meantime, check out this playlist, The Story of Deep Purple. I'm covering all bands and adjacent bands. So it's not just Deep Purple, it's Whitesnake, Gillan, Ian Gillan Band, Rainbow, and select Black Sabbath albums that fit within the Deep Purple family tree. So thanks for watching. More to come. Like, subscribe. See you in the next one.